This is Shane Gibson's podcast from closingbigger.net. Today we've got Jim Keenan on the show. Jim, thanks a lot for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you. It's going to be fun.
So I'm excited to have Jim on here on the show, and this is one of the reasons why is Jim is one of my favorite, probably top 10 in my opinion. He's one of the top 10 thought leaders in the sales space online, period. And I follow his stuff, his in-depth studies he's done on social selling, and also his no BS shows and rants on the internet. I find extremely refreshing. And so I'm excited because Jim's got a new book coming out, which I've had a bit of a chance to have a quick sneak preview, but I'm looking forward to digging into the rest of it over the next few weeks. But the book's called Not Taught: What It Takes to Be Successful in the 21st Century That Nobody's Teaching You, with a foreword actually written by one of my other favorite guys on the internet, Chris Brogan. And so, Jim, before we get rolling, I thought maybe you'd let us know a little bit about how did you get into this space? How did you get into doing what you're doing today as a sales thought leader with a sales guy?
Thanks for having me, Shane. Love talking with you. Every time I get into Canada, I try to connect with you. We never make it happen, so we need to make that happen.
Ski season, man. We got to do it.
Yes, it's ski season, and our relationship is sort of representative of what I talk about in the book, and also how I got into the space. So to answer your question, the Reader's Digest version, and it's not going to be much longer before that phrase goes out of style because no one knows what the hell Reader's Digest is. But outside of that, the Reader's Digest version is I was a head of sales, and I had gone through a layoff, and we'd been purchased. There was a merger, and they let go of most of the sales organization for the incumbent sales organization. So thinking I would have no problem getting a job, I just went out and started looking. I had always crushed it. I had been wildly successful, so I said, no problem. But for whatever crazy reason, it took me almost a year, and I did not like that at all. And so I had just gotten married. I had a new baby. We were building a house. I mean, the stress was through the roof. So I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to start a blog, and I'm going to share my knowledge, my experience, and the things that are going on in the job on this blog. And the thought was, if I do this for a year or two, and I get a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 followers, that would be great. And if I ever needed a job again, I'd have all these people who knew who I was. My content would have spoken for itself, right? I wouldn't have to send a resume out. These people are like, oh, I know this guy. I've been reading his stuff. He's great. Well, lo and behold, rather than that being the outcome started being people like you started taking notice. Companies called me up and said, hey, I've read this post. I'm following this. We need help. We struggle with this. Can you help us? And within 2 years, I was getting, lots of attention and written up, and it just sort of took off. And then, oddly enough, we went through another merger. A global European company bought the company I was working with. Once again, let the entire sales team go. And I had a choice. I could go get another job, or I could follow this consulting path. And that's what I did.
So that choice, that's something that people face all the time. And they say things like, well, I haven't got enough money saved up yet that I can jump off and do my own thing, or now's not the right time. Or what's your advice to these people? What did you go through, and what's your advice in making that decision to kind of choose to go the path you've gone versus start knocking on doors again with your resume?
Well, okay, so notice the circumstance of events, and I think most people are right? I would say now, with looking back, anybody who says I'm going to go and be a consultant, or I'm going to go out and start my own business, and they haven't been saving up tons, even if they've been saving up tons of money, unless it's something like a coffee shop or something like it, I think you're an idiot, because it wasn't the money that allowed me to start this business. It's that I had spent 2 years building a brand before I made that choice to go do it. So really, the idea was, with 2 years of a brand under my belt, the decision to go and start the consulting business versus the decision to start knocking on doors with my resume was really a no-brainer, because each one was going to take me about the same time. And actually, it took me less time to land my first consulting client than would have taken me to get a job. So it really wasn't the capital or lack of capital that made the decision. It was simply my brand had been developed over 2 years, so it was just an easy easy decision just to say, okay, step right over here.
And this is,
And that's what I talk about in the book.
This analogy
So,
will probably go out along with the Reader's Digest analogy, but is dig the well before you need the water, right? And that's
amen.
the key here is that you built a personal brand before you needed it, and I think that's the challenge I see with a lot of people. They're like, look, I just built my own website. I got a month to bring in business before I'm out of cash, and they've got no
Yes.
tribe. And I don't know how many authors I've seen who approached me saying, hey, I've launched a new book. My publisher says I should learn about this social media stuff and to market the book. And I'm, it's never too late to start, but it's probably late for that book. And so I think that's an awesome lesson. Is for me, as I hear you talk, is if you want to launch yourself into the space as a consultant or an entrepreneur, especially as a thought leader, the best time to start is today. Even if you're not going to do it for another couple of years.
Yes. Your social brand, your social presence always has to be 6 months to a year ahead of where you are.
That's a great quote. So your social presence has to be 6 months to a year before ahead of, say it again, ahead of where you are now.
Yes.
And that's awesome. And I think you'll probably see that on one of my slides with your picture below it in my next seminar, because that is such a golden piece for me right there. So this book, I was reading through and I saw tell us about what the book's about. I've got my idea what the book's about, and I got a couple pieces I want to ask you questions about. But what kind of made you so passionate that you wanted to invest probably months of your life putting this together and marketing it and sharing it with the world? What's the core passion behind this book and message that you want to share?
So let's separate the passion from the message. So the passion was that there is tremendous opportunity out here for people today. Like, I think about my world today, and if it weren't for social media, I wouldn't be as successful as I am today. Because what I do in the book is I talk about the transition from the industrial age to the information age, and the opportunities that the information age is creating for people if they know what to do. And I realize that no one's teaching people this. No one's telling them it's really changed. It's changing, but no one has really addressed or taking a look at how it's affecting work, how it's affecting how to find work, how to grow your success, how to capitalize on opportunities, and nobody is doing that. No one's teaching anybody that, right? So the passion for me was, oh my God, this is huge. Like, people can change their lives with this. They don't have to be victims. They don't have to be beholden to the way things were. They don't have to take 6 months to find a new job. They don't have to work in a job forever that they hate. They don't have to, wait for a publisher to give them permission to publish a book. They don't have to wait for an agent to make them a superstar, right? I mean, whatever it is you want to do, you can go do it. Unlike back in the old days where you couldn't. And so that transition, all those opportunities where the passion came from, the reason I wrote the book, if you will, is because I realized that nobody was really teaching these things. They were sort of floating around in the ether independently. Well, everybody knows we moved from the industrial age to the information age. Everybody knows the internet exists. Everybody knows that Justin Bieber became famous because of YouTube. But no one's really sat and strung it all together and said, wait a minute. All the rules have changed, and you're still operating from the old rules. You lost your job, so you send out your resume, and you've got 6 connections on LinkedIn because you never even thought about it. Right?
Yeah. You could tell. You could tell. I always can tell who in my network is thinking about looking for a new job because all of a sudden they update their LinkedIn. But it's a week before they get laid off or quit. It's not 2 years before where they're building relationships. So I love this statement. The statement you make right in the introduction of the book is, and this is kind of the headline, and I want you to talk about this. I'm curious, what is it we're in the dark with? Is that if you're over 30, you're in the dark and no one is teaching you. What are you talking about here? What are they in the dark about? What are 2 or 3 things that no one's teaching them?
What it's going to take to be successful in this new world, right? So let's go with one of the things no one's teaching you, right? One of the things that no one's teaching you is that experience matters less and less. And it's your expertise that people want, right? In the industrial age, we relied on experience because it was almost impossible to measure someone's expertise. So what we did is we said, oh, look, they've got 10 years experience. And what we did in that environment is we applied an assumption of what we thought that person gleaned from those 10 years, right? 10 years selling, so he's probably a pretty good salesperson. He's probably experienced it, done this and done that and da-da-da. And so we made an assumption. Well, now in the information age, with the access of information, we don't have to rely on experience as much anymore. Because if you have a powerful brand, if you're blogging, if you've built reach, if you're engaging in social media, if you're engaging on LinkedIn, you have the ability to demonstrate your expertise. And so now I don't have to worry about experience. I can just focus on your expertise. So rather than moving through life thinking about experience as this time card thing, do my time. I talk about in the book, in the industrial age, it's punch card after punch card. It's morning after morning. It's day after day, and I'm building this experience, whether or not I'm actually applying expertise to it. David Dunning gave me a great quote when I had him on my show. He said, "Look, there are people with 10 years experience and 2 years expertise, where there are other people with 2 years experience and 10 years expertise." Stop focusing on your experience and stop focusing on your expertise. Grow your knowledge base. So there's one example, right? Another one is, this is like a millennial one, results versus time, right? Employers don't want your time anymore. They don't care how long it takes you. Please don't tell me you worked on that all night. Please don't talk about how hard you're working. Tell me what you've actually done.
Absolutely.
Tell me what you've actually... Go look. In the book, I say, go look at your LinkedIn or your resume. And I got $100 that says things like responsible for, worked with, participated in. They're all time-oriented action verbs, right? How many of them say finished, delivered, completed, authored, built, created?
Absolutely.
How many times do you use those words?
And you talk about...
And why don't we... Yes, sir.
And I think that this is, along with being results driven, and it is a world of expertise, you also don't want to be your own best kept secret. And so in your book, you're talking about really what is the reach revolution, and that is more important than cash is your reach. And could you expand upon that, what that means for this audience, whether I'm a sales professional, business owner, entrepreneur? What is this reach revolution you're talking about?
So great points. That's a way that the information age of the 21st century has changed drastically, because we have the ability now to influence large swaths of people. Reach in the industrial age was owned by a very few group of people. Okay, reach is a powerful, powerful asset. It's probably the most valuable non-monetary asset in the world, and here's why. I talk in the book about the paper magnet. Why am I spacing his name now? It'll come to me in 1 second, right? The gentleman who owned all the newspapers. Oh my gosh, it'll come to me in a second. So, and the reason he was one of the richest people in the world is because he owned all these newspapers. And what makes a newspaper valuable? The print? Is it the print that makes a newspaper valuable?
No, it's the reach.
It's William Hearst, by the way.
Yeah, William Hearst, that's right.
It's the fact that people actually read the paper. So I pay you to put an advertisement if you could get me in front of so many people. The amount of people you can get in front of is a powerful, powerful asset. During the industrial age, it was almost impossible for the average person to generate reach. It was almost impossible. It was guarded like gold. You had the newspapers and your big publishing companies. Randolph Hearst was one of the richest people in the world because he could touch millions of people. You had your radio, and that was about it. And then as you moved through, into the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, then you had publishers. You had the movie studios. All of these people had reach, and they decided who got to play, right? They picked our movie stars for us. They picked our books for us. So if you couldn't penetrate that, you had no reach. And even when you did penetrate, they would tell you how to act. They would make you change your name. They would do all the stuff, right? So that they owned that reach. It was worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. And then all of a sudden, now we're in the information age and the internet age, and now anybody can build that reach. So back to make this more micro, remember when you asked me what made me decide to move into consulting versus go find another job?
Yeah.
I had built a microcosm of reach where there were thousands of people who were interested in my selling techniques, my approach to building business sales organizations, how I fix sales organizations. And so I was able to influence enough people that they would pay me money to be a consultant. So it wasn't one day saying, hey, look, I've got 200 grand in the bank. I got $1 million in the bank. I'm going to go start a consulting company because I have the time to build it. It was, I have this audience, this engaged audience that I can reach out to, that I can influence, that will pay me or connect me with someone who will pay me. And so I can start the business now.
So I think about, and this is, maybe for those our listeners here who are building their audience, and maybe they are moving in to be a consultant, or they just want to establish themselves as a thought leader in their space. What are, I can think of back in my kind of social media path, I can think of, 2 or 3 really big events or partnerships or moves that I made that helped kind of blow my reach up, that accelerated the growth of my reach. What are some of the things that you did personally I can think of a couple I think that you did, but I want you to tell me, what are some of the things you did and partnerships you developed that helped you kind of grow your reach geometrically versus in a linear way?
So the most important one, or the biggest one, and I'm not even sure, to be completely honest, how they found me. Obviously my blog, but I can't remember who it was or why they felt I was worthy. But there was a group that we're in together called STA. And it's a group it's a group of other sales thought leaders. And some of these are some pretty big names, Anthony Iannarino and David Brock was, I don't know if he was part of the group, but he was a leader who was a big fan of mine, started tweeting my stuff. So there was this group of people who already established, Joe Conrad, who already established, and someone from them reached out to me and said, hey, we like what you're doing. We'd like you to be part of our group. And what we do is we just help each other, share each other's stuff, and help each other where we can. So that recognition then just sort of, like to your point, exponentially grew my exposure as people with their own networks said, hey, look at this guy over here. We just found him. He's pretty good. He's young. He's dynamic and blah, blah, blah. So it was that. It was connecting with other people, and it was then leveraging, obviously, all the social media in the world from Twitter to everything else. But that was one of the biggest catapults for me that gave me the, what's the word I'm looking for? Gave me the recognition and to take me to the next level.
And the other one I saw you do, which I thought was brilliant, and I think in the first year you did it, partnered with 2 different organizations, but both times you partnered with some well-known brands in the social selling space, is you did your B2B social selling study. I think this last one was a quota attainment study, and that was amazing. You partnered with Kite Desk this last time around and studied 500 sales professionals. And I watched all of a sudden, the Keenan, who I love to hang out with on Twitter, and I love your content, and I've been a fan since you started. And I remember when you were still blogging and when you first started off in that job, and and then moving into on your own. And but when I saw you do that, I thought, man, I wish I did that. That was an awesome idea, and it was really great because I watched. All of a sudden, I turned around and everybody in the social selling space was quoting you, and it was the great thing is that really what you did is you invested in creating this one awesome piece of content that just pays and pays and pays, and I think that was a really cool move. Anyways, so hats off for that one. But that was a
thank you.
Where would someone go to find that study, by the way? Because I know I talk about it all the time, but do you have a link, or what's the best place to find that study for my audience? I mean, I can tell you what I'll do in my blog.
Yes.
I'll post a link to that for them that they can check that out.
And you just want to go to a Sales Guy U. A Sales Guy U, just says it's spelled ASALES Guy U, and I have tons of resources there. It's just a bottomless pit of resources, and you'll see both studies. You can get them independently, or you can download them as a kit.
Fantastic. So that was a really cool piece of content, and what I like about it is And this is what I've noticed about your strategy of building reach is it's about being of immense value to your target market. And I mean, I know that took a lot of work to do, and a lot of people would look at the amount of work it takes to do something like that or an in-depth white paper. But I'm assuming that you're still getting downloads by the hour of that, and it's driving a ton of business for you.
It's a very valid piece from Reach. It's funny, I didn't set out to be, what it's done most is everybody calls me a social selling expert. I didn't do that. I just really wanted to answer a question. Does social selling make a difference? That's all I wanted to do. I didn't really have any big grand schemes for it. And then the data started coming back and I was like, wow, this is pretty fascinating. Look at this. And so I just started slicing and dicing it up. So it was fun to do, and it really did. And it was, no one had done it before then. I just sort of stumbled into it. So because no one had done it, everybody was dying for something they could get their arms around. So I was like, all right, here you go. So
Absolutely.
It was good. I enjoyed it.
So one of the things you talk about, so after you talk about reach, there's also, for me, I always think about how do I get above just being, another Me Too guy creating identical content with other people on the internet, because there's so much noise out there. And the other thing you talk about is the importance of building the brand of you. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes.
What's, for our audience, we talk about building the brand of you. What does that mean? How do they do that?
Okay, so brand you is no different than the brand of a product, right? What I tell people all the time, and I've talked about this long before the internet came out, is you are a product, okay? If you don't like it, sorry. If you think it feels unhuman, sorry. It is what it is, okay? The bottom line is someone pays you to do something, you are a product. And so therefore, they're going through the same process in their head on paying you to do something as they do to buy a car, as they do to buy a house, as they do to buy a new piece of software, as they do to any other purchase. They're going through the same process. Is there enough value here for the money I'm going to pay? Will this person make my life easier? Will this person's abilities get the job done that I need to get done? Will I be in a better place with this person than if I didn't have this person? So if you learn to accept that, then all the traditional branding rules apply. You have to stop and say, who's my target market? What value do I deliver? So if I'm an accountant, am I a corporate accountant, and do I bring value to the finance team? Or am I a small company accountant, and do I bring value to the controller, right? And what value do I bring? How am I a better accountant than I am than the next person sitting next to me? If there's 5 of us in a room and we're all accountants, we all know the same information. So what is it that I do with the information? What is it I do with my job that makes me a better accountant? So once you just define this product of you, of what makes you better at delivering value in the field that you choose, you then have to promote that brand, right? I say, look, in the 21st century, you got to build brand new and promote the shit out of it, because you have to sell it. Just like Tide is to sell Tide and Clorox is to sell Clorox, you got to sell you. And so therefore, you got to know your value, and then you got to pick the platforms and mediums to sell that value so that other people see it and say, oh, I want that guy, I want that girl, I want that accountant, I want that babysitter, I want, that person over there.
So
if you can't do that, you're dead.
Jim, but I'm an accountant. What do you mean social media is a must? What do you mean I have to build I don't have time to do that. What's your answer to those guys?
Good, great. You don't have time. Sit your ass in your seat. And when you need a new job, or you leave that company, pray to God that the person you're competing with didn't actually spend the last 2 years blogging about the intricacies of accounting and how companies can save money by leveraging this particular unique gap principle that just came out, or how, right? So because you're sitting there in your seat just doing your job, someone else is explaining why they're a damn good accountant.
Absolutely.
Right. So one of the things I haven't had to look for a job in years, but I always said to myself, God, if I ever had to go back and someone said, hey, Jim, walk us through your sales process, I can say, wait, you know what? I blogged about that. Right. Let me tell you what that is. Let me tell you how it matters. And let me send you the link to it so you can go read it yourself. They'll have so much information on me and why I'm great. Jim, why should you hire? Well, I can tell you why, but, did you read my article on Harvard Business Review? Did you see me in Forbes? Did you see that? What do you want to know? Did you read my ebook on on cold calling. Did you download my template on how to evaluate and assess sales teams for performance? What do you want to know, man? I don't have to sit in this chair and just, you know what I'm saying, and just say, well, for 10 years I worked here.
Yeah, so what you're talking, so a big part of it is content. I mean, and that's, I guess I'm kind of reading through here, kind of flipping through your book here, but a big part of that, there's reach, and then there's the brand of you, deciding who you are, and it sounds to me like you talk a lot in the book about the fact that your vehicle to get there is content creation. But the question is, and I get this all the time, is,
yes,
Shane, what do I blog about? Do I blog or use YouTube? What should I do? What's your advice on that area?
Okay, so there's two questions you asked. One was the medium. Should I blog or use YouTube? And I'll start that one easy because start one first because it's easier. Ask yourself, what kind of person are you? Are you a writer? Are you oratory? Are you animated and visual? Right? What strengths do you have? And then use the medium that will fit your strengths. So if you're a really good writer, just write. If you got this really big personality, use YouTube. If you're very articulate, but you don't feel you're that visual, that you present yourself on film real well, then do what we're doing here, do a podcast. It really doesn't matter the medium. Just pick the medium that works best for you. And I talk about this in the book. What matters more is the content you choose to produce. And this is one that people don't like to hear. If you can't figure out what to write on, chances are you're not very freaking good. You're either super humble and you don't realize how smart you are, or you're really not that good. Because I never thought for a second I didn't know what to write about. I was writing like crazy. It took 2 years or 3 years before I started struggling with what to write about because I'd already written about a lot of stuff. So if you say, well, I'm an accountant, what would I write about? If you can't figure out what to write about in an hour, sitting down and thinking, okay, what can I teach people in the accounting space about? If you don't know, then that's the first sign you're not very good, and all the more reason you need to get your ass on this train because you need to elevate your game.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting because it's just, all people tell me, hey, I don't know what to write about. I'm like, okay, well, let's write down the top 20 common questions that people ask your sales team when they call in. Let's start with that. And in a consulting session, what are the 5 biggest pains your customers have? I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I have some content. And it's funny because what most people don't do is that key piece you talked about. When is the last time the average person sat down with a blank sheet of paper and wrote down, 5 things that they feel the marketplace needs to know about their space? And there's their first blog post, 5 blog posts. Actually, it's probably their first 50 blog posts. But they don't even just take the time to sit down and think about through their customer's eyes or through their market's eyes where it hurts or what they need help on. So I think that people are nervous. They're as Seth Godin talks about, they're sitting there polishing pixels and they're not hitting the publish button. And they get paralysis, or analysis paralysis. And this is, something I see all the time about it's not good enough to publish. What's your advice for the people who don't feel like their content is not good enough, perfect enough, effective enough to publish? What's your thoughts on that? How do you get good at it? What's your advice to them?
You know what? That is a great question. Just this morning, one of my, what I call beta readers, the book's gone out to over 100 people who are reading it before it's published. He wrote back and he said, Jim, great book. I loved it. It was awesome. And he said, it really got me thinking. And he goes, I blogged a few times, I twittered a few times, but I really haven't done with it because I'm afraid people won't like it. And that is a very real emotion. And here's what I say to people. Who cares? Right? Just start writing. Just start writing. Now, look, my book hasn't even launched yet. 100 people have read it, including some big names, and I'm getting amazingly positive feedback, but I'm still sweating in my pants the day this launches, and I'm afraid I'm only going to sell 50 copies because nobody likes it. So you'll never escape, right? You'll never escape this fear of failure. You'll never escape this fear that people aren't going to like your stuff. So what you have to do is you just have to start, and you have to be committed to putting out the best content is good. And this goes back to that point where I was being kind of harsh with people, like saying, if you don't know what to write, it's probably not very good. The power of building a brand and the power of leveraging, creating content is it by default elevates your game. You have to be aware of what you know. You can't be on cruise control, right? If you're going to write a blog post about a sales process or how to overcome an objection, and you have that fear is pretty good. You're not just going to put out a piece of crap. You're really going to think long and hard about how you describe overcoming an objection, because you know that if you put out crap and everybody sees it, they're going to call you on it. So what do? You have your own belief. You might go do a little research, read a few things, say, oh, you know what? I forgot this piece. That's a great point. And then you go at it. And then you get the feedback that says, one person said that was stupid, 10 that says it was good. You focus on the 10 that said it was good and you do it again.
That's awesome. And I think it goes back to that. Writers learn by writing too, and that's the thing, is it just makes your game better. You study harder, right? And I think that's key.
Yes.
And the more you do it, the better you
it
get.
Absolutely ups your game. Absolutely.
I often wonder, my blog started back in 2004, and if you dig back to I've got the dates. You can click on my blog and you can read some of the stuff that I wrote in 2004. I mean, it's not bad, but I often wonder, should I delete it? But it's great to watch how you evolve as you practice your craft of sharing content. And I think, there's an evolution. If you watch Gary Vaynerchuk's Wine Library videos, which is one of my favorite series of marketing. Watch his first 5 videos, and then watch video number 148, and then watch video number 180, and watch the evolution. So I think people are going to get better at it too. And this goes back to chapter 5 in your book. They have to have the balls to make it happen, and I think that's kind of what it means, right? Is you have to pull the trigger and get started. Do you have any tips to kind of get over that fear, or any thoughts around how to get someone beyond that little hump where they're afraid to get going?
And that chapter isn't even just about starting a social media presence. That is about taking any risk at all. Right now, I actually tell a story in there about Lauren Luke. She's a makeup artist / makeup guru. She was this English girl from the UK, 16 or 17. She was a single mom. She was, as she described, portly. She said she had the worst high school experience ever because she was poor, she was fat, everybody made fun of her, they treated her like crap, she didn't have good fashion because she was, didn't have a lot of money. And she was trying to figure out a way to spend time with her son and make a living. And she was a dispatch for a taxi company, and that sucked. And she did a couple other things that all sucked. And one day she saved up just enough money to try to start selling makeup online, on YouTube, or online, I should say. And it kind of went okay. She was kind of making small things. And then she decided, well, wait a minute, what if I do a YouTube video with pictures of the makeup? Not YouTube video, so just pictures of the makeup. So she started creating a place where you could actually see the makeup. And then all of a sudden, when you started showing the makeup, or people wearing the makeup, it took off even more. And then she's got this idea, said, what if I show people how to apply it? So she started her YouTube channel showing people how to actually apply the makeup. Well, fast forward, I don't know how long it's been, 6, 7, 8 years now, whatever. She has a deal with Sephora. She has her, avatar in a video game. But think about what I talk about in the book is think about the precipice. That spot where this girl who had been ridiculed her whole life about her appearance has to make the decision to put herself out there publicly, putting on makeup in front of potentially millions of people. And she did it. Had she not done that, she would not be where she is today. So when I talk about, have the balls to make it happen, in that chapter, my whole point is, if you want to be successful, you have to take risks. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. There is no success in safety. And think about how most of us, think about the industrial age, because remember, this whole book is predicated on the idea of moving from the industrial age to the information age. During the industrial age, we prized people who didn't take risks. The pace of change was so much slower, right? So a risk was costly because you didn't have to take that risk. Things went so slow, you could do it in chunks, right? If you didn't get it right away, it was okay. You could sort of iterate and do it later because nothing went too fast. Now things go so fast that if you think you just sit and take your time, it's over before you get started. right? So this whole idea of being able to move quickly and change is critical in the 21st century. So in order to do that, you have to be willing to take chances. You have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, because the steady Eddie, play it safe. I mean, think about the language we used in just 10 years ago, right? Don't upset the apple cart. Just get in the job and do it well, and you'll stay there for 20 years. And this whole idea of being safe and not rocking the boat was prized. It's not that way anymore.
So part of being
Things move too
safe,
fast.
and I think about like learning new skills, as is learning how to sell, is the need for people
Yes.
today to sell. You talk about this in the book, and I, of course, I was born, and my dad was a motivational sales speaker. I was like literally born into the business. Like people say, "How'd you get started, Shane?" I'm like, genetics. So selling to me was, I had to sell in order to be able to talk at the dinner table, because there was like four of us trying to talk at the same time. But not everybody grows up in that environment. Some people are resistant to learning to sell, and they don't. They think, "Hey, I've got a degree, and I'm a computing engineer. Do I really need to learn how to sell, or I don't want to learn how to sell? Should everybody be selling? Do we all need that skill? That's the question."
So yes, and the question is, everybody already is selling, and everybody already was selling. They just didn't recognize it, and they weren't doing it as often. But the number one sales job of every person in this world who is not a salesperson is arguably the job interview. If you don't think you're selling when you're going to get a job, something tells me you're not very good at much of anything, right? When I got my wife to marry me, that was a sales job. Getting my kids to eat their broccoli, that's a sales job.
What clothes did you use on your wife? I'm just curious. What clothes did you use?
Yeah, right.
Did you use the urgency clothes or the puppy dog clothes?
Dude, I used the new school one. I built up so much demand that when it was time for the clothes, she was ready for the clothes.
There you go. I think that's the right answer. I think that's the right answer. Good answer.
Yes, yeah, she was ready. So we've always been selling. We just didn't realize it was selling. Number one. And so if you, like using your example, I'm a coder, I'm an IT guy, and I'm a programmer, and I have my degree. Why do I need to learn how to sell? And I would say, okay, let me ask you this question. What coding language do you use? Ruby on Rails. What is the best coding language for developing a SaaS application for B2C that's not going to grow any larger than X amount of users and move this much data? Oh my God, easily Ruby on Rails. So great, you start working for a company and they're looking to build a SaaS application like that, but they want to use Python. If you can't sell, how are you going to get them to use Ruby?
Absolutely. And I think that's
the key.
Selling people. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that sales is really, I often look at it as it's the ability to connect with another person and create an environment where an act of faith can take place, and it's about building that credibility. Now, what if I took it a step further, Shane?
Yes. Shane, what if I took your definition of sales a step further? Sales is the ability to influence change.
And that's a big one. And I think that's actually a huge one, is influencing change. And I mean, I think on both sides of the fence, we're so resistant to change, and then it's helping people kind of maybe not do what they want, but do what they need to do in a lot of cases as well. Kind of moving through the book here and just kind of looking at what you've covered and what you've talked about. And this is a big one for me, is, a lot of people after they finish school, after they finish university, a lot of people don't pick up another book for a long darn time. And I see that. And I have people say to me, "How do I sell to CEOs?" And I'm like, "Well, do you read Forbes? Do you read Fortune? Do you subscribe to the blog posts that they subscribe to? Do you know what kind of conversations? And do you speak their language?" Well, no. Well, what books do you read? And they're like, "Well, not a lot, actually. I'm more of I like to watch stuff, And so I think, you talk about deliberate learning, and that's part of the formula. Do you have any tips on learning? Do you have any insights on learning you could share with our audience to make them better learners or better lifelong learners?
I'm going to answer the question shortly, and then I'll come from the back door. I don't have tips on learning, because I think learning is a very personal thing, right? It's auditory, kinesthetic, or visual is like the major framework. What I talk about in my book that I really emphasize is what you just sort of referenced. It's a commitment to learning. I almost didn't write this chapter, but as I thought about the industrial age versus the information age, in the industrial age, think about this, Shane, learning was a lot more difficult. If you wanted to learn something, in most cases, you had to literally get your ass up out of the chair and go to the library. Right? I mean, there was a lot of physical work. Most of our learning took place from kindergarten to the end of college. And that's why college was so important to the industrial age, because universities had the greatest concentration of knowledge from a proximity perspective. I go to school, I've got professors and books and libraries all right here. And so I can have access to it and I can get it done, right? And those who didn't go to school, their ability to learn, or college, their ability to learn what those who did go to college was substantially hindered. They didn't have access to the professors, they didn't have access to the curriculums, they didn't have access to the content. And so even if they were really smart, the chances of them acquiring that level of knowledge and learning at an accelerated rate was severely stunted. In the information age, that's not true anymore. You can learn anything you want with a keystroke in seconds. And so there was absolutely no excuse for not learning. And so therefore, one of the most strategic success elements is deliberate learning. It says, what don't I know? What is my gap in knowledge and understanding as it relates to what I do? And let me fill that gap to propel myself forward. And when I'm done with that, ask the question again, okay, now what's my next gap? Go learn it and propel myself forward.
Yeah, fantastic. So, learning. Let's talk about some sources for learning. Obviously, your book comes out when? When do we launch it? What's the launch date of your book where people can order it online and have it delivered to their house or their office or to their Kindle?
I'm going to say December 15th. It might be early. I'm shooting for December 1st, but you know how you got to rely on other people. And with the holidays, I'm getting nervous. So we'll say December 7th. We'll split the difference. December 7th.
December 7th. So the book comes out December 7th. So Not Taught is the title of the book by Jim Keenan, and that's Keenan. You can just give him a holler on Twitter at Keenan as well, and I'm sure he'd love that. Jim, other than your book, which would be the first one I suggest people pick up, from a lifelong learning perspective, who are the best thought leaders or pieces of insight that you would suggest people pick up? Who are your go-to gurus and thought leaders that help you build an inspired life that they should also be tapping into?
So let me be cheesy. Let me be cheesy and say that Get Not Taught, and in the back, I have a whole section where I list the thought leaders in each of the chapters.
Page 143,
right?
Actually.
So, yes, right? And so rather than me saying the ones I like the best, you can read the book and you can say to yourself, wow, I need to get better with deliberate learning. And so then you can go in the back, and under deliberate learning, I list some people you can follow. I list people you can follow for reach, for brand you, change. Every chapter has a resource or multiple resources, people or studies or books or all of the above that can help you learn to get better in that particular area.
Fantastic. Well, Jim, one last tip. If you had one last piece of insight to share with the audience here on really competing and excelling in this environment today and 6 months ahead from today, what would that be? What's that one piece of advice you'd love to give the audience?
From a macro perspective, is own it. There's never been a better time and an easier time, to be perfectly frank, to own and build your own success and not be beholden to a system, whether it's your bosses or a education system or an agent or whatever. There's fewer gatekeepers, is what I say. Never been a better time. So the first piece of advice is own it. And then the micro piece, build the brand you, build reach, and promote the shit out of it.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Jim, thank you very much for being on the show today. Jim, how do people get a hold of you? How do they learn about your book? What's your blog? What's the best way to connect with you?
So obviously, if you run search meta Jim Keenan, you'll find me anywhere. You can find the book at nottaught.com. As you said, I'm on Twitter at Keenan on Twitter. And then salesguide.com is my sales blog and site. So any one of those places. But for the book, nottaught.com.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Jim, for coming on the show.
Thank you, my man. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
This is Shane Gibson's podcast from closingbigger.net. You can find notes and links to this show at closingbigger.net, and you can also follow me on Twitter at Shane Gibson.